got an awesome case for us. And I really like this one because it highlights one of the things about consulting that you never think about, which is how many businesses interact with you on a daily basis that you just would have not even realized were businesses.
Oh, I'm interested.
So the company's called Plastic Co., and I'll explain a little bit their products in a minute. This is a BCG-style case. And so BCG in general, heavy on creativity, really passionate about tying creativity to analytics, and also really focused on, for you in particular, in this case, leading me through your desired analysis. The focus is on it's a market study case. It's focused on taking market share or declining market share. And so we'll dive in with that.
Great.
Sound
I'm
good?
ready when you are.
All right. So our client is the CEO of Plastic Co., a large supplier of straws to quick service restaurants. While profits and revenues have been steady, the CEO is concerned about the influx of cheaper products from Southeast Asia. They want to know how they should tackle this problem.
Okay. So just to clarify, our client today is the CEO of Plastic Co., which is a straw supplier in just the United States, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing fine on profits. They're not super worried, but they are concerned about Southeast Asia offering cheap replacements and perhaps coming in and stealing some of their market share.
Correct.
Now, I do just want to ask one or two questions. Number one, the goal here is just to maintain profitability, or is it to grow, or?
What do you think?
At least maintain, but I would hope they want to grow as well.
Sure. I think that's fair. I certainly think that they want to know that there's a pathway to not decreasing profitability,
yes,
like you're talking about. So they don't want it to stay the same, but they're concerned about maybe looming or future erosion of profitability. And so right now, before they get there, they want to think about what the options are. If you can get me more profit, always give me more profit.
Perfect. And then the last question, you said quick service stores. Is that like a fast food like McDonald's, Taco Bell?
Totally.
Places like that. Places
Wendy's,
where,
yes.
yeah, straws in a little paper tube.
That's exactly
what we're
right.
looking at.
Unless you're in California.
Yeah, unless you're in California, then it's metal. Do you mind if I just take a minute or two to organize my thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I've jotted down a few thoughts here, and I'd love to walk you through them. So I've really tried to break my thoughts into three main buckets: the financial considerations, the non-financial considerations, and then some possible moves. You know, we're in a situation where we have this impending doom over our heads, and I think if we just stay still and don't do anything, we're bound to it. And so I think having some sort of ideas to go forward would be great. I want to start with financial considerations, though, as this is. We're looking at their profits, and specifically we're looking at the fact that our competitors or a competitor in Southeast Asia is able to charge much less than us. And that's
Do we know that?
Was that not mentioned at the beginning in terms of they're coming in?
Well, they've entered the market, but we don't necessarily know that their cost position is better.
That's maybe
than
a bold assumption on mine. I would assume, given it is coming from Asia, maybe it's being mass produced and it is relatively cheaper to produce.
Okay.
But then again, it might be more expensive to ship to here.
Okay.
With that being said, though, I'd love to look at the costs in terms of our current costs. Can we go ahead and cut those? Is there room for optimization? I'd love to look at the price that we charge in terms of, is it possible that we increase price to gain more revenue? Is it possible that we maybe have to decrease price to sell more units? And looking at those two levers. And then lastly, sort of tied in with cost, just looking at the distributions. If we're going to fast food things, are we selling to the franchises? Are we selling to the overall brand? I.e., if we sell to McDonald's where they franchise, are they going to require those straws in every single McDonald's, or are they only going to require it in certain franchises? In terms of the non-financial considerations, I wanted to look at the relationships that we can build with our current clients. If it is the franchise and it's more of a family model, we really want to make sure that we have that relationship and that some unknown company from Southeast Asia doesn't just come in and poach them from us. And also just looking at branding. I don't really ever think of a straws brand. I don't know if anyone I know could name a straw brand off the top of their head, but maybe there's some room for improvement there in terms of the how we look to the overall market. And lastly, in terms of possible moves, I think innovation listed broadly in terms of maybe we have other product lines that we can go to, whether it's plastic utensils or napkins or anything in that region. And also maybe even looking at merging or acquiring. I don't think that will necessarily be where I'd want to take this case first, but it's a possibility. And so maybe if Southeast Asia can produce them much cheaper or has some sort of advantage with different clientele that we can get advantage of, let's maybe look at merging or acquiring.
Okay, I like it. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with financial considerations.
Okay, and which part of it?
I'd love to look at the costs if we can.
Okay, and now what are the types of costs that go into manufacturing a straw?
Yeah, I would imagine raw materials is probably a big cost.
Which are what?
Some sort of plastic. I know, again, I think it depends where you are. I know in California we have recyclable straws made out of different materials, and maybe they produce those, maybe they don't, maybe it's just plastic. I'm not actually 100% sure the main type of plastic that goes in with straws. But then also, if they are covering those, then either plastic wrap or paper.
Okay.
It's probably paper. So those are two, like, the main raw material costs. Then also the machinery that is being run to actually form these straws and package them automatically.
Okay.
Looking at the distribution channels, so shipping them, whether it's in cars, freight, ships or planes, whatever, around America. And then also, I would imagine it's not a huge cost, but SG&A, just making sure that we are able to find clients and actually market to them and sell them straws.
One of those will probably be, well, not necessarily one, but some of them will be unlikely to be higher. In Southeast Asia, they'll be much more likely to be lower there.
Yeah.
What would you expect would be the cost that would be lower in Southeast Asia?
Potentially raw materials, if they're a much bigger location, they are getting more raw materials, they might be able to get that at a cheaper price per unit of these raw materials. And then also the labor cost might be a little bit lower. I'm not so sure about the factories and SG&A. They may be more similar. But I'd probably like to start with, like, raw materials and things.
Okay, awesome. Well, I've got some details for you. So
Great.
Here's an exhibit.
Okay, so just to walk you through what I'm looking at here, we've got the line item in terms of costs, as well as the selling price, and then our company versus our competitor.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I want to do with this is just call out that we seem to be selling for more than the competitor. I don't know if there's a unit acquired with or associated with this graph. Maybe 15 units per straw. Is that 15 cents or 15?
Yes, it's 15 cents. For
Okay,
straw. Mm-hmm.
perfect. So I can go ahead and calculate the actual profit for both of these.
Great.
That just seems like the logical next step.
Yep.
There. So in terms of Plastic Co., we have 15 cents for the selling price, and we're going to have to minus there the 6 cents for raw materials, the 5 cents for manufacturing, and the 1 cent for distribution, which added up is 12. So we are making 3 cents per straw. In terms of our Southeast Asia competitor, they're only selling it for 11, so they're probably maybe selling more units or something, but they do have to pay similar-ish costs. They're having to pay $5 for raw materials, plus 3 for manufacturing, plus 3 for distribution, which actually adds up, and they make no profit. They are currently not making profit on their straws, which immediately raises some concern of, if they're doing that, there has to be a reason behind that, right?
What could be the reasons?
Maybe there's a bigger picture. Maybe there's strategy in there trying to, I would imagine, and this might be a bold assumption, so please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of fast food places and quick service restaurants, they might not want to go buy their straws from one person and the napkins from another and their utensils from another. I would imagine it's a one-stop shop. If we have a contract with one person. And so if our SEA competitor can provide straws at a lower cost, maybe that's how they get their foot in the door to sell napkins and utensils and other things that will make a larger profit. And so that's probably one of the reasons. And another reason is maybe they're getting into this and they know that in the long run they can cut costs more and there's more options for synergy and that they will eventually be profitable. But right now they're selling at a loss to establish a foot in the market.
Okay. Any other ways or reasons why they're doing it?
I can't think of any more reasons that they would actively choose to do that unless they were forced to. Maybe in the actual Southeast Asia area, that's the price of which they have to compete at, and everyone else is selling it for maybe even lower than them, and so they have no choice but to sell at that price. And so that's why they're maybe looking for the United States for a market.
So based on this, if our client is thinking about selling for cheaper, and we talked earlier, we weren't sure if they can produce for a lower cost. Now we can see a little bit about what's happening with the cost, but your hypothesis was that they would be a cheaper price, and that was part of the case prompt. So now we can see, is a lower price on the cost just distributed differently? Talk to me just a little bit about what we should do based on just this information before we move on.
Based on just this information, I feel like the place that most people will go would be, we can lower our price a little bit, and we can still lower it 2 cents so that we're at 13 cents and we're still making profit and we're closer. But I would imagine that it's maybe not the case. Maybe there's other ways we can look into, other product mixes in terms of combining things, and hopefully looking at synergies where we can lower those costs. But I wouldn't have enough information to just say, I think we should just go and lower the price or increase the price or anything. I wonder if there's any more information on maybe other factors or something.
So in order to get the next piece of information, you're going to have to give me a direction to go.
Yeah.
So tell me whether you think we would lower the price or would raise the price.
Before I would decide on whether we would raise or lower the price, I'd love to maybe look at the other areas in the framework that I have. So maybe the non-financial considerations, if we have any of those.
Okay. Which ones in particular?
Let's start with relationships or brand. Let's start with relationships, and we'll move to branding afterwards.
Okay. And what do you want to know specifically? Because obviously they're non-financial, but that doesn't mean we can't measure them.
Yeah. Well, if they're partnering with stores and there's contracts, I'm assuming this is B2B. I'm assuming that the business that they are selling to has other things that matter than purely the price. Maybe they care about the eco-friendliness of the product, or they care about can I count on you to get my straws in time, and I don't want to have to be waiting with no straws in my restaurant. Something like that.
Great. Well, I do have some information about customer preferences, so I'll share this with you.
Great.
What do you think about this?
Okay, so I'm going to start on the left here. This is the consumer preference score out of 5 with price versus trust. Trust refers to trust and reliability in the company. Price refers to price. Okay, so it looks like customers prefer trust over price by double, which is already a good sign, because even if we do charge more, if we are more reliable than the Southeast Asia competitor, that's really good. And that actually takes me onto the right here. The price scores, that's out of 5, client versus competitor. So the competitors, 5 out of 5, they're doing great. We're low, they do have to pay more. However, our trust scores are much higher. And if you compute a weighted average, which I'm maybe happy to jump into, that might be a good way to evaluate our standing in the market.
Okay. What do you think that this says overall? Again, going back to the kind of key issue, price changing,
Yeah, I think if we can lower our price a little bit, maybe just down by 1 cent, I think that does help at least alleviate a little bit of tension where we're in the lowest category right now of price, with maintaining our trust. However, there is a risk there that if we start changing our price around, the trust might fall a little bit. Because one thing I'm noticing is that they do not trust this competitor at all, even though they have the cheapest straws. And what that makes me wonder is maybe they're associating price with reliability. And they're saying that if I pay more, I think I'm going to get a better amount of reliability. And so that's definitely a factor to consider.
Fantastic. Okay. What's your final recommendation?
Final recommendation would be to go ahead and build out a more strategic way to perhaps look at our pricing in terms of, I think it might be better to lower it a little bit, but just making sure that with that, we shouldn't be sacrificing trust. Trust is more important than price, and so they need to remember that. And obviously we know that right now our profits are fine. And so if we can look into ways to invest and lower our costs so we can also lower our price and maintain profitability whilst keeping our trust up, I think that would be a really good way forward. But again, just remembering that the risk there is trust is most important, and we have to focus on that. In terms of some next steps, I think, just looking into the financials a bit more, really digging down in the cost department and see if we can reduce any, and making sure that we're keeping the trust with our clients.
So Ed, what did you think?
It was an interesting case. It felt very, it felt pretty surface level compared to a lot of cases. And I wonder if that was the nature of the case, or if maybe You're
not accusing me as the interviewer.
No,
shallow,
absolutely
are you?
not. No. I'm saying maybe the case itself is a little bit more simple, or maybe I've missed a big part here, and I felt like maybe I could have dug deeper in certain areas.
So I don't think that you should blame yourself for kind of coming to the conclusion fairly quickly, which is, I think, probably the more likely answer, the third option.
Yes.
And so let's walk back through some of the key pieces. So right at the beginning, I think just maybe, again, a real sharp focus on the market share aspect of this, right? Because we're not actually concerned about profits going down. Our revenues haven't gone down, but we are concerned about market share. And we never really poked into how we would measure it, what the options are. I feel like that was one layer that could have been helpful, but I didn't need that to know that you would be good at consulting. I gave you a 4 on both the case recap and the clarifying questions. I thought those were both very strong today. The only one that you might have been able to ask, which I actually kind of, inserted a little bit later, was what is the breakdown of the manufacturing process? Do we source? Do we manufacture? Do we distribute? Right? What do we do? Therefore, when we go and look at it later, it would be easier maybe to figure out some of those things. So maybe you had a really good handle or grasp on what was going on. But anyhow, then, clarifying questions, again, really good. 4 out of 4 for the opening, super strong. And then, one of the things that I really liked as we were kind of working through everything for the structure was that you walked through the financial, the non-financial, and the possible moves. My only feedback for the structure would have been not calling non-financial, because right when I hear it, even though you're not saying it, it feels like it's non-numerical. And so just thinking of maybe another way to characterize that, right? You put relationships, you put branding, maybe something, just maybe even external, calling it customer or external or some other kind of satisfaction or upside, or I don't know what we would call it exactly, but something other than that. I really liked your possible moves piece. I felt like that helped create action inside the structure. And for a BCG case in particular, I really liked that. So that was a good job. Look, the math in this one isn't hard, right? But what you did well was that you identified what you were looking for in the math. We could have beaten around the bush if you had layered into your structure complexity that was unnecessary. So I actually felt like you got really focused on what the thing was. You want to do financial and you want to do cost first. Well, guess what? I had cost first, right? Yeah. Why? Because this is an Asian supplier versus a US manufacturer. Like, you knew that with pretty high likelihood that this was going to be an issue. What I felt like you could have done a better job on with the answer, and I still gave you a 4 because you had insights, but there was just that you said that maybe there were things that were missing. Here's one place. What if in this part, instead of just saying, look, they're making 0, you said, look, I think that what this means is that our client, just take a strong stance. I think that our client should not change price.
Yeah. Commit to something.
And here's why. Number 1, they may be in a temporary situation. Number 2, right? And really punching in on, these are the things that we now know about this client and competitor that we didn't know before. And so I felt like you kind of were waffling a little bit as we were going through the case. It was like, well, they could lower price a little, they could look at costs a little, but in reality, they could do nothing on price. And then when we move on, they could do everything on trust.
Yeah.
Right. And there are shades of gray in a lot of these cases, but I feel like if you really want to stand out to me, you can take a stronger stand on that and then go after proving it. And then at the end say, look, there are certainly things that I would miss out on. Exhibit work was really good. Again, there wasn't actually additional math to calculate in these. Usually there is, but you maybe could have referenced more numbers, right? The Southeast Asia competitor is 500%, right, of X. This is 50% higher. Like you could have.
What I was thinking was doing a weighted Like average of
Totally.
cost or something?
And you could do that, but this, we don't have any volumes to weight it with. So I don't know that there's a way that we could have done it unless I had more information for you. If you do want to do that, just ask specifically for the information.
Okay.
And so, again, I think the insight here was that trust is the core value. How do we build trust? Let's double down on that. And then your final recommendation was very good. Excellent recap of the case, then what you thought we should do. But again, I would have liked just a stronger stand. But structure-wise was really good. And then risks and next steps were both very clear. So nice job overall.
Thank you.